BioShock was always a series I heard very high praise about, but like with a lot of games I discuss on my channel, I hadn't actually played it until very recently. One day I randomly decided to get the BioShock collection while it was on sale, just to see what all the hype was about, and after playing them all, I quickly learned, damn, this series is just so good from start to finish. When I played the first game, I actually wasn't planning on making a video about it, but after completing it, I realized I had to yap about this. And that's exactly what I'm gonna do now. Discuss and review each game in the series, BioShock, BioShock 2, and BioShock Infinite. What I liked about each of them, their stories, the combat, and anything else I want to mention. Kind of a given, but just in case, spoilers ahead for each game's story and ending. So without further ado, let's dive right into the first game, where it all began. The first game in the series, released in 2007, is BioShock. So to quickly set the stage for this game and the next, BioShock takes place in the underwater city of Rapture. Built in 1946 by a man named Andrew Ryan, it was intended to be a place where gifted individuals could live and thrive, far away from the oppressive clutches of what he called the parasites on the surface. However, as all utopian societies eventually do, Rapture began to crumble. After lots of tension had been brewing, a civil war broke out between Ryan and a man named Atlas. The citizens also slowly became addicted to Adam and Eve, not the biblical kind, eventually turning them into splicers, basically just severe addicts that have their mind and body seriously decayed. These are probably the two biggest factors that led to the fall of Rapture, and this soiled version of it, the aftermath of an entire civil war, is exactly what you walk right into. In this game, you play as a man named Jack. After your plane crashes into the ocean, you go to a lighthouse that sends you straight down via bathysphere into the city of Rapture. At first, you mainly communicate with Atlas, who I mentioned earlier. For a while at least, he is your guiding beacon through the strange underwater hellhole filled with people trying to kill you. But, in one of the most shocking twists I've ever seen, it's eventually revealed by Andrew Ryan himself that Atlas had been controlling Jack this whole time by using a simple phrase you hear him say numerous times but probably think nothing of: "Would you kindly?" Ryan even goes so far as to have Jack beat him to death with a golf club after saying "would you kindly," to really drive home a quote he'd been repeating this whole confrontation.
A man chooses, a slave obeys.
Fun fact, there's a challenge in Fallout New Vegas called A Slave Obeys that you complete by killing Mr. House with a golf club. Makes me wonder if House was inspired by Ryan. They're both some of my favorite video game villains for sure. Anyways, the rest of the game is spent hunting down Atlas, who is actually a man named Frank Fontaine.
You're bald?
Kind of getting revenge and ridding Rapture of him once and for all. Andrew Ryan is a pretty bad dude, as you learn more and more while playing, and although Fontaine tried to stand up to him, he isn't a good guy in the slightest. He's just as bad, if not worse. They're basically two sides of the same coin. They went about things differently and have different beliefs, but all in all, both of them wanted to rule Rapture, no matter what. You also make choices throughout the game that could give you a good or bad ending.
Yoink.
This being to choose whether you want to harvest or save the Little Sisters. Little Sisters are young girls that have been genetically enhanced and conditioned to go around collecting Adam from dead bodies. They are accompanied by the Big Daddies, huge dudes wearing modified diving suits that were originally made to do repairs, but now keep Little Sisters safe while they retrieve Adam. You even briefly become a Big Daddy toward the end, perhaps a little teaser for the next game. I chose to save each Little Sister because I'm not a monster, and the good ending shows Jack taking them all to the surface to live out a good life far away from Rapture, and it's really sweet. The story here is absolutely amazing in my opinion. Not only do you have the unique world of Rapture with so many secrets to uncover, but the narrative story itself is filled with twists, turns, choices, and really intriguing characters to interact with, like of course Andrew Ryan, Fontaine, Tenenbaum, or even the artist Sandra Cohen, who made these lovely displays of dead people. That twist with Atlas was just insane, but piecing together the awful truths behind the Big Daddies, Little Sisters, and even Jack himself was also just as fascinating. This is certainly not the first game to feature characters having a diary, but I think it's done very well in BioShock. In the game, you can pick up audio diaries that were recorded by numerous people within Rapture. They really enhance the story by providing more context on different areas, tidbits about Rapture, or even just showcasing a character's personality. The combat is pretty fun too. It's a first-person shooter, of course, but I think most of the fun one comes from plasmids, different abilities you find throughout the map or buy from a gatherer's gardening vending machine, like fire at your fingertips or... This is what the Adam and Eve I mentioned earlier is for. Adam is used to buy or upgrade plasmids, while the Eve is basically like your Magicka bar. It's what allows you to do them in the first place. Each time you die, you respawn inside of the nearest Vita chamber instead of just being sent to an old checkpoint or save. Honestly, I kind of prefer it to just loading an old save. It's a fun way of connecting an element within the world to a game mechanic. This and many other elements were yoinked straight from the game's System Shock, so there you go. You can also do some epic hacking in this game, like hacking the security bots to have them fight for you, or hacking the vending machines for some good discounts. But spoiler alert, I think this hacking is the most fun in the entire series. Now, one of my favorite parts of this game is the world design and atmosphere. Even though it's in a state of complete disarray, I still find Rapture to be absolutely beautiful sometimes. Most of the buildings have these huge windows where you can look out and see other buildings, lit up signs, and even sea life swimming by. Of course, the city is now all damaged with splicers everywhere, but it's clear to see what it once was, and it's oddly cozy sometimes, hearing the relaxing sounds of the water and maybe watching a jellyfish swim by, but could still be very creepy and ominous, like all the dead bodies Ryan has nailed to the walls or the very first splicer you encounter. Honestly, it's borderline a horror game sometimes. The music also really enhances the atmosphere as well. The original soundtrack of the game is top-notch, like the music that plays while Rapture is being revealed to you. But to my delight, there are some good oldies in this game and the next that make you want to get up and do a little jig. And it does help remind you that this game is actually set in 1960. Overall, BioShock is a fantastic game and a strong first entry to the series. Genius storytelling with very compelling characters and a city filled with dark secrets to be uncovered. One complaint that I do have is that I think around the halfway point of the game, you have to build a Lazarus vector to reanimate the dead plants within Arcadia, and you do this by collecting a few different ingredients to craft it. This isn't difficult or anything, but I found this section to be a bit boring, since I was just wandering around trying to find distilled water or chlorophyll. To me, it kind of just felt like a very drawn-out fetch quest. I also think the fight with Fontaine at the very end was slightly underwhelming. This isn't a Dark Souls game, so I wouldn't want it to be extremely difficult, but I don't know, it was just super easy and I think I beat him within a few minutes. Kinda just went by fast, but that ending is still really good, so I'll forgive it. But I think those are really the only complaints I have, and they're not even that big of a deal. I still had a blast with BioShock, so pretty much immediately after completing it, I moved on to the sequel. While the opening to BioShock was mysterious and filled with action, BioShock 2's opening is just pretty sad. In the sequel, you actually play as a Big Daddy, Subject Delta. In the intro, you watch him follow and protect a little sister before he gets hit by a hypnotized plasmid and is instructed by the game's villain, Dr. Sophia Lamb, to end his own life. It's a very heavy start to the game, but Delta actually survived, since Eleanor, his previous little sister, was able to revive him using a Vita chamber 10 years later. If I got a nickel each time a video game protagonist in a game I've played survived a gunshot to the head, I'd have 2 nickels. Not a lot, but weird that it's happened twice. Throughout the game, Subject Delta and Eleanor are trying to reunite with one another, but face numerous roadblocks caused by Lamb, who I mentioned a moment ago. A psychiatrist for Rapture that is almost the polar opposite of Ryan, personality and belief-wise, and these beliefs even became a religion. But, just as importantly, Lamb is also the mother to Eleanor, who was kidnapped and turned into a little sister while her mother was arrested. At first, it seems kinda sad that her daughter seems to love a Big Daddy more than her actual mother, but this lady is no good. She desperately wanted Eleanor to be a genius and follow in her footsteps, and she tried doing this by having her isolated and keeping her away from other children. This sounds familiar. Lamb also subjected some of her own followers, people she knew, and of course her own daughter to Adam experiments, and also kidnapped little girls from the surface. So, nah, I don't feel too bad for her. Anyway, BioShock 2 is much more focused on the relationship and bond between the Big Daddies and Little Sisters, which I think is a really good idea, considering they are some of the coolest parts of the BioShock series. And this isn't some coworker type of relationship, no. Big Daddies and Little Sisters are psychologically bonded to one another, and the Alpha series, which Delta is a part of, will actually enter a coma or die if the little sister does. When you eventually find Eleanor after numerous trials and tribulations, Lamb actually ends the bond that Delta and her share by briefly stopping her heart, meaning he doesn't have too much time left. But luckily, you get to fight alongside Eleanor, donning a big sister suit, and they manage to escape to the surface together. Delta unfortunately does not survive much longer after this, but Eleanor is able to extract his atom and retain his memories and conscience, meaning she'll always have a part of him even though he's gone. It's still a pretty sweet ending overall, since they are finally reunited after the whole game, but damn you, Sophia Lamb, I was so sad watching Delta pass away. I was really hoping he would somehow survive. Gameplay-wise, this game is pretty similar to the first. It's still a first-person shooter set in the city of Rapture, and you do fight a lot of the same enemies. However, it does have some really interesting differences that sets itself apart from the first, in my opinion. For starters, there are some new enemies, including Big Sisters, who are grown-up little sisters that kind of take on the role of Big Daddy. They are tough to fight, but I usually cheesed it by just freezing them a bunch and giving them a good whack. Once again, you're presented with a choice of saving or harvesting little sisters, sort of. When you find them in the world, you can either harvest them like last time, or rescue them, which means you protect them while they gather atom for you, like a Big Daddy would. After they collect it, you return them to their tunnel, and then have the choice of harvesting or saving. Like last time, I rescued and saved them all because I'm not a complete monster. And you know what? It'd make much more sense to save them here, if anything. You are a Big Daddy after all. You even get to briefly play as a little sister toward the end of the game, where you see firsthand how their mental conditioning affects their perception of the world. It's very cool, but very sad at the same time. I do also think it's kind of funny how their designs went from this to this. Got rid of those big heads and eyes. The choice to save or harvest them impacts the ending like last time, but you also meet 3 different characters during the game that you have the option to spare or not spare. They are each connected to Eleanor and Lamb, and you learn about who they are and get their backstories. I spared Grace Holloway and Dr. Gilbert Alexander, but I did kill Stanley Poole. Grace tries to have you killed, yes, they all do actually, but she did seem to really care for Eleanor and honestly seemed like a nice woman in a bad situation. Alexander actually designed the intense bond that alpha Big Daddies and little sisters have, but ended up going crazy after Lamb subjected him to an atom experiment. Alexander actually has pre-recorded voice memos that help you through this section and repeatedly says he wants you to kill him, but his present self begs to not be killed, so I don't really know what the right option here is, but I just left him alive. His face on those flying screens also really reminded me of the scientist in Old World Blues. This is like the 3rd time I've mentioned New Vegas, I'm so sorry. Now that dude Stanley, I do not feel bad for or care. I ended that guy. Normally, I like to be a good noodle when I play games and show mercy, but this guy sold Eleanor to an orphanage and then flooded an entire area within Rapture, killing everyone inside of it. I still got the good ending, so I'm happy. There's actually 6 different endings you can get instead of just 2 like last time, which impacts if Eleanor chooses to save Lamb or not, and it can change the ending cutscene. Another change this game makes is with the combat.
Buck wild.
Unlike the previous game, you now dual wield a weapon and plasmid. This minor change honestly makes the combat so much more fun and kind of easier. Instead of having to switch from weapon to plasmid, you can just hit them one right after the other. And of course, getting to use the iconic Big Daddy drill is a blast. If you have enough fuel, you can actually use the drill for its intended purpose, or just give him a nasty uppercut, no fuel required. I didn't really do melee attacks very often in the first game, but I use the drill all the time here. The sequel continues the trend of a fantastic soundtrack, my favorite is Eleanor's Lullaby, but has even more good oldies in it. I especially love how the loading screens for each area has a different song playing. I didn't really know when exactly to mention it, but there's a few brief moments in the game where you actually walk on the ocean floor. You kind of get to fully use the Big Daddy diving suit and see a whole new perspective of Rapture. I think these sections were cool. All in all, BioShock 2 is an amazing follow-up to the first game. I think they made the right choice in focusing the story on Big Daddies and little sisters, rather than trying to do a similar plot to the first game. You can't exactly top a story like that, plus it would just be kind of boring. Gameplay and setting-wise, nothing too much changed aside from some minor details, but I honestly think that's just fine. Introducing dual wielding and some new weapons really refreshed the combat, so it doesn't just feel like you're playing the first game all over again. BioShock 1 had its somber moments, but I think BioShock 2's story tugged much more at the heartstrings. Jack realizing he had been manipulated his whole life is pretty depressing, but I think it feels more angry, kind of a story of betrayal and realization. The sequel, however, is just about a man trying to reunite with a girl who he sees as a daughter, 2 people who share a unique and intense bond. With all that being said, something I hate to admit is that in the grand scheme of things, I do think most of the story is a little forgettable. I remember much more about the first game's story than the sequel, and I played BioShock 2 more recently. Like, I'm just now realizing I completely forgot to mention Sinclair, who is kind of an Atlas-type character, helps you navigate the story and find Eleanor, so there you go. The ending cutscene with Delta and Eleanor is my favorite part and incredibly well done, and so is that beginning cutscene, of course, but everything in between just kind of left my brain. It's still good, don't get me wrong, just maybe not as iconic or memorable as the first. I played the remastered versions of the first two games, but I experienced quite a few crashes while playing this one. The first time it crashed, my game hadn't been saved in a long time, so it sent me really far back. It crashed a few more times after this, usually right in the middle of combat, but toward the end of the game it kind of stopped, so that was nice. This doesn't impact my thoughts on the story or game at all, but I felt the need to mention it just in case anyone else plays this on Steam. It happens so often at one point that I almost went crazy. Still love it though. Although most of the story may escape my mind, I do like the ending here more than the first, probably one of my favorite video game endings, period. It made me cry and really struck a chord with me. And I can't lie, I just love Delta and Eleanor so much. I actually took a bit of a BioShock break after this to play some other stuff, but of course, after two incredible games back to back, I was so excited to hop back in and see what the next installment had in store. So this brings us to the latest game in the series, BioShock Infinite. As you can tell from the title screen alone, this game is a pretty big departure from the first two, setting and story-wise.
The racist.
We aren't in Rapture anymore, Toto. Instead of a dystopian city under the sea, we're now in a dystopian city in the sky, built in 1902 called Columbia. The game's protagonist is a man named Booker, who is sent to retrieve a girl to wipe away his debt, which spirals into an insane story of rescuing a girl named Elizabeth who can open terrors to other realities, and by the end, lots of alternate timeline and time travel shenanigans ensue. So first things first, unlike some comments and reviews I've seen, I actually really enjoyed Infinite's story. I was captivated from the very beginning, and as it goes on, it just gets more and more intense, the stakes rise, and so much information slowly gets revealed to you. Like the original game, I'd say this one also has a pretty crazy twist where it's revealed that Booker is Comstock in another timeline, the founder of Columbia who calls himself a prophet, makes everyone worship him, and is not a good dude at all. Maybe even more evil than Andrew Ryan. Elizabeth is definitely the highlight of the story. She has an interesting arc of going from a naive young girl shut away in a tower by Comstock her whole life to a more serious and sad woman. She went through a lot throughout the course of the game. Can't really say I blame her. Her outfit and hair changing about halfway through after she kills Daisy Fitzroy was a huge indicator of the change, and I think that was a really neat touch. That second outfit does slay though, I'm not gonna lie. The ending sequence is my favorite part and probably the most iconic as well. Elizabeth opens different doors to alternate realities for Booker, which shows numerous events play out, like her being kidnapped from Booker, showing that she was his daughter, before eventually revealing that he indeed was Comstock the whole time. And the Lutece twins are so entertaining. I liked when they randomly appeared throughout the story, adding to the mystery and confusion of it all. I thought they were just these quirky twin characters helping Booker and Elizabeth and moving the story along, but they end up being very big players in the story. Like the other games in the series, the world design here is top notch. I still think I prefer Rapture as a setting, but Columbia is really cool in its own way, and I do like that design-wise. It's almost a polar opposite to Rapture. High up in the clouds, much lighter colors, and a whole different aesthetic. Despite the horrific things that happen within, this city can look absolutely gorgeous. Soldiers Field, especially Main Street, was my favorite in terms of design. All the glowing lights and signs paired with the purple sky and the clouds are so pretty. It seems like a great place to take an early evening stroll, aside from getting jumped by Slate soldiers, of course. The interior designs, especially in the Hall of Heroes, is really well done too. And the rooms in the First Lady's Memorial with classical music and the shining purple sky displayed on the wall look so good. I mean, it is filled with absolute lies, but you can't say it doesn't look pretty though. There's still audio diaries called voxophones in Infinite, recorded by the characters that, once again, help piece together what Columbia is, how it came to be, the tears, and other details that further enhance the story by giving us more information. There's also kinetoscopes that play little silent films about Columbia and its history as well. In the first two games, we see the bleak aftermath of a civil war in Rapture, but in this game, we get to see a civil war firsthand. In fact, Booker basically started it, in one of the timelines at least. After it begins, the city quickly goes into a state of disarray, with the Vox Populi, a group of revolutionaries led by Daisy Fitzroy, now inhabiting the areas above with ruined buildings, propaganda, and dead bodies strewn about. And of course, the music in this game still goes hard. Lots of great oldies, as well as some music from the 70s and 80s, because time travel. You even hear some covers of these newer songs throughout the game, like a Vox Populi girl singing Fortunate Son, showing how the people in Columbia were taking inspiration from songs of the future because of all the tears. My favorite is the cover of God Only Knows you hear from the Barbershop Quartet in the beginning. It also plays in the credits and kind of takes on a whole new meaning after what happened. The combat in Infinite is still very similar to the past two games. It's still a first-person shooter, and you still use things like plasmids and Eve, but they now just have some new names. There's some really cool new ones, like Bucking Bronco, which throws your enemies up in the sky and stops them from attacking you. Probably my favorite one in the game, especially when fighting a crowd of enemies. You no longer dual-wield a weapon and plasmid, sadly, but I guess you aren't a Big Daddy anymore, so maybe that's why. The new melee weapon in the game that also doubles as a mode of transportation is the Skyhook. There's skylines all throughout Columbia, and you can use a skyhook to jump on and swing from place to place. You can also jump down and stomp on enemies while riding on them, and the hook itself can be used for a regular melee attack.
Smack that bitch.
If the enemy is weak enough, you can even perform an execution, which is a whole lot of fun. Once you find Elizabeth, she basically becomes your companion for the rest of the game, except for that one part. I was really worried she would kind of be like Ashley from Resident Evil 4, where you have to constantly protect her. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but surprisingly, she actually can't be killed by enemies. Elizabeth just stays out of harm's way, and can even open tears during combat to bring in more weapons, health packs, or even some little helpers to assist you in battle. And, of course, she can also toss some helpful stuff, like ammo, while you're fighting. I like that Elizabeth is actually helpful in her own way while in combat, rather than having to keep enemies off of her, or just giving her a gun. In fact, she might protect Booker more than Booker protects her, honestly. She even revives you each time you die. She's a real homie. Overall, I had a great time with BioShock Infinite. It really changed things up in the series, a drastically new setting and introducing alternate realities. And while I'm sure some people don't really care for this, I commend them for trying so many new things here. It's also a bit more cinematic with more cutscenes and sequences, and I think that's always a welcome change. I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of turned off by it not taking place in Rapture at first.
City at the bottom of the ocean. Ridiculous.
But Columbia definitely grew on me after a while. The skylines and skyhooks are one of my favorite changes to the game. Such a fun way of quickly hopping from place to place or making your grand escape from a group of enemies. While I did really enjoy the story and it definitely surprised me at every twist and turn, I do think introducing infinite timelines does make things a little more confusing. This is perfectly okay, not every story has to be straightforward, but I did find it a little more difficult trying to piece together everything I knew about the story. I feel like it wasn't until after I finished the game and kind of dwelled on it for a few days that I was able to fully understand what exactly happened, although that might just say more about me. And one last little complaint, I'm just gonna say it, the handymen are nowhere near as cool as Big Daddies, I'm sorry. The ending sequence with all the doors to other realities, including the one to Rapture that made me soy jack at the screen, was really awesome. Not quite as emotional as the previous two endings, still a bit sad though, but it has some really crazy reveals that leave you shocked and kind of scratching your head, for me at least. BioShock Infinite is still an amazing game overall. I have a few complaints, but I'd still recommend this game to anyone and everyone, as long as you beat the first two. In case anyone is curious, I did play both episodes of the expansion pack, Burial at Sea, which I have a lot of thoughts about that may get its own dedicated video in the future, since I wanted to keep this to the 3 games at their core. Alright, I think it only makes sense now to rank all 3 games from my least to most favorite to kind of wrap things up here. I think all 3 games are amazing in their own ways, so this was really hard to do. But to make this a bit easier myself, I'm mostly just focusing on the stories themselves with these rankings. Some outside factors like the setting and combat might affect it a little bit, but I do think the stories really are the meat and potatoes of each game. I'm probably gonna get some flack for this, but my least favorite is BioShock Infinite. This does not mean in any way it was bad, quite the contrary, but when compared to the first two, this one just comes in last place for me personally. Although the story here is really fantastic, Elizabeth is a great companion, and it has such unique ideas, I still prefer the story seen within BioShock and BioShock 2. In second place is BioShock 2. This game has my favorite ending of the whole series, and the combat is the best as well, but like I mentioned earlier, I did find most of the story to be a little forgettable. I also just love Delta and Eleanor, maybe even a little bit more than Elizabeth and Booker. I know that's probably crazy of me to say, and of course I love them too, but I just have a soft spot for Delta. I also think BioShock 2 is kind of underrated. I feel like I hear the least about it when people talk about the series, and I think it's a real shame. And of course, that leaves BioShock at the #1 spot, my favorite in the series. While the other two games still tell a great story, nothing quite tops the complete mystery and intrigue behind the first game. This is where you learn about Rapture from Atlas and the countless audio diaries found throughout the map. It's where you learn the truth about Andrew Ryan, Frank Fontaine, and Jack. And yeah, the Booker Comstock twist was crazy, but the Would You Kindly absolutely tops it, no offense. Seeing that board right before talking with Ryan, where you realize what Jack had been all along, and all the pieces fall together, is just absolutely insane, and unless you got it spoiled, you'd probably never see it coming. The story overall is just iconic, and unfortunately more memorable than BioShock 2. Infinite's story is pretty unforgettable as well, but it didn't quite hit as hard as the first game did in my opinion. But let me be clear once again, despite these rankings, each game is still really good. While the stories of each completely differ, there's some reoccurring themes found within each, like fatherhood. Jack can become a sort of father to the little sisters, and in the next two games, you literally play as a dude looking for his daughter. There's themes of discrimination, empathy, propaganda, human biology, it's called BioShock after all, and you know, there's always a man, always a lighthouse, and always a city. Supposedly a fourth game is in development by a new team, and I don't know what exactly I would want or expect, but I just really hope it's good because I wouldn't want one bad game tainting its legacy. But for now at least, BioShock is for sure one of my favorite video game franchises. Some of the best and most profound writing I've ever seen in a video game or any piece of media. These are the stories that leave you feeling empty and pondering it days after beating it. And I don't know about you guys, but those are always my favorite games.